old as me. I could have lied there, probably shouldn't have. But really delighted to have you all here. I know most of you, but for those I don't know, I'm Mary Coxon, and for the first time really in public, I'm announcing and telling everyone that I'm the president of the board of the Oral Health Foundation. So really lovely to be here. I was lucky that we did have my meeting face to face. I'm not sure Ben had quite as much luck, to be honest. But yeah, welcome. And if I haven't met you before, please do afterwards make time to come and tell me who you are and what you do and what you think about the foundation. I'd really appreciate that. Also, always looking for trustees. I'll get that out early. I may mention it again. Always looking for trustees. So back to National Smile Month. So the theme this month is about everyone deserving a healthy smile, which I think is really clear and means something. Yeah. And the Oral Health Foundation and its board and its managing team have a real passion for reducing oral health inequalities. It's something they've been doing for a long time, and they've been doing it thanks to a lot of you in this room today. So this year it's about shining a light on the millions of people that are affected by oral health problems and decay, disease, pain. Most importantly, the ones that really struggle to get access, either those that need care from others who are vulnerable, elderly, disabled, or those that just can't access for whatever reason education, the right dietary advice and support, and because of socio-economic factors sometimes don't have access to any of those things at all. So I'll just go back to that title. It's, everybody deserves a healthy smile. And it's completely preventable, this disease. It's why we put so much work into National Smile Month. And National Smile Month is a fantastic 46 years worth of campaign that reaches over 5 million people every month that we do it. Maybe we'll make 6 this year with your help too. So I'm really just here to set up for the speakers and get you in the right frame of mind about thinking what you're going to do, the people that are out there that make the difference, the people in the practices, the businesses, the partners that we have, to really make it so that everybody can have a healthy smile. So a huge thank you to you and our supporters wide in the room. A huge thank you, I think, to the management team, which don't always get called out. It was missed out in the speech they wrote for me. But they do a huge amount of work behind the scenes, transferring National Smile Month to an amazing digital campaign when we couldn't be here in person. And I'm just excited to see what we all do to bring this to life over the next month. So, without further ado, I will hand over to our Chief Executive of the Oral Health Foundation, Dr. Nigel Parker.
Thanks, Mary. And really, just to repeat some of what Mary said, it's great to be here in person again after 2 years of these National Smile Month launches. Are always a great event, getting together, acknowledging the contribution of our sponsors to make things such a success, and meeting together in a way that over the last couple of years we've not been able to. Quite incredible to think, as Mary says, National Smile Month now in its 46th year, having started as National Smile Week, as a nice smiles competition in the Birmingham Evening Mail all that time ago, and then within a year or so being taken up nationally. And I really shouldn't admit it, but I have to say I was present at the first meeting when we were organising that very first National Smile Month. So it's been a long journey, but it's been fantastic to see how it's grown and the number of people that we managed to impact during that time. This is going to be a very interesting change year. We've had 2 years where the campaign has been totally digital. Because we weren't able to do our normal grassroots activity of practices on the ground, opening their doors to patients, going out, reaching out into the community. Early signs are this year there is going to be some of that activity again, and hopefully by the time it comes to 2023, we'll be back to some greater degree of normality. As Mary said, what we're concentrating on this year is inequalities. The smiley is still the main symbol of the campaign, but we're actually looking at particularly focusing on inequalities and also looking at a theme week by week. So we're going to be focusing on the life of a smile, how the requirements to keep that smile healthy vary from cradle to grave through the life course. The affordability of the smile, and this is an interesting one in these times of high inflation. Over very many years, every survey that's done shows that one of the main perceived barriers to oral health and going to the dentist is actually the cost of it. But our experience from the helpline and the reality is that very often people are overestimating what it's going to cost. And high quality dentistry is not unaffordable to many. There are people that get caught in traps when they first roll onto NHS dental charges, but in general we provide a good service from that point of view. We're going to then focus in the third week on nutrition. In the fourth week we're going to be looking at how oral health varies around the UK. It's a postcode lottery. We've seen a lot in the media over the last few weeks, first about lack of availability of NHS dentistry in Suffolk and East Anglia, and then last week in Somerset, and a lot of media interest last week. We were doing a lot of interviews with both the national press and TV about the inability to find NHS dentists, and this isn't going to go away overnight. We know that the dentists just aren't there. And it does seem as though there is not a wish to really address the problem and train more dentists. And whether that dentistry is being delivered on the NHS or in the private sector, it can't be delivered in either without an adequate workforce and supply of dentists. So we would certainly urge early action on actually getting more dentists there. And then in the final week, we're going to be looking at some of the oral systemic connections and how, as we say, you really cannot achieve overall health and well-being without having good oral health and well-being. So really, if we look at the overarching theme for the campaign and using popular political speak at the moment, what we're going to be looking for during this campaign and this National Smile Month is a levelling up agenda for oral health, so that everybody can achieve the standards of good oral health that they really deserve. Now, this campaign really couldn't take place without the support of our sponsors. Great support of sponsors that stick with us year after year and support the campaign. So I'd like to thank Align Technology, Oral-B, Wrigley Oral Health Programme, Johnson & Johnson, Listerine and GSK for all their support to the campaign, and you'll see a lot more of their activity during the next month. I'd encourage you, please, share the website www.smilemonth.org with colleagues and patients. Share the activity that you're undertaking during National Smile Month and support social media using the hashtag Smile Month. Do take your smiley selfies today. We've got several areas that can be done, and you can then post them online and help to grow the impact of the campaign. Now, courtesy of two of our speakers, we do have two of our sponsors rather, we do have two speakers today who are going to give us some brief presentations. First one being Professor Avi Banerjee from King's College, who I'm sure is well known to you all and really doesn't need any further introduction. So I can't see him, I've lost it, there we are. You're hiding.
First of all, it's an absolute pleasure and honour to be here today, and I thank the Oral Health Foundation and Wrigley's oral health programme for asking me to speak, and for reminding me to put my trousers on before giving a presentation, which I haven't done for about 2 years. Joking aside, I think what you've spoken about and the mission is really, really critical at the moment with what's happened in the last 2 years with COVID. The pandemic has highlighted the key issues in oral and general healthcare that we see on a daily basis in the news. We have the access issues, we're getting data from the BDA, from HealthWatch, around the country, and it's really quite depressing reading. You've got the inequalities that have been mentioned, the social inequalities, the demographics that we have in the UK, and other countries around the world, let's not forget. And of course, this impacts on the quality of oral and dental health, which has declined over the last 2 years. And we know from WHO and the global burden of disease studies that were published again over the last decade, in terms of dental caries, nearly 40% of humans on the planet are still suffering from this condition. So, we need to think a bit differently. We need to move away from just treating disease, this idea of tertiary prevention, and we need to move towards preventing disease, primary and secondary prevention. We need to bring back the National Health Service, as opposed to a National Illness Service or a National Treatment Service. And we need to keep individuals and populations healthy throughout their whole lives, from the moment they're born to the moment they pass. So to do that, we need to engage with all stakeholders. And I think that's so critical, and many are in this room today. We've obviously got the profession, clinicians, academics, researchers, policymakers, regulators, industry partners, insurance companies, dare I say it, the media. The biggest challenge, perhaps. But I've left one group out on purpose till the last, which is patients and the public. To get primary prevention out there, the public has to take some responsibility. And we have to help them take that responsibility. But doing it in traditional modes perhaps isn't the right thing to do anymore. And again, the pandemic has allowed us to think outside the box a little bit in this regard. I quote Benjamin Franklin, a very famous quote: "Tell me and I forget, teach me I remember, involve me I learn." And that's what it's all about. So we need to innovate in the way we change behaviour and engage with public about primary prevention. And this then fits in as to how do we do that. We can't just instruct people, it doesn't work. Everybody's tried that for years and years and years, it doesn't work. What we need to do is target areas of society, behaviours that are already inculcated, and see whether we can tweak those and modify those to our benefit and for patients' benefit. And that's where I come in with the WHP, with Wrigley Oral Health Programme and sugar-free gums. Current data is showing that 30% of the UK population are chewing gum. 30%. That's a significant number. And we can debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the point is they're doing it. So if that's a habit that's already there, perhaps we can tweak that habit. And that's the trick with the prevention and the modes that we need to move forwards with. I was privileged enough to lead a fantastic research team at King's College over the last 4 years, looking at systematic reviews of the use of sugar-free gum in this regard. Looking at data from the last 40 years and processing that data to look at the incidence of tooth decay, looking at the quality and quantity of plaque that's in the mouth, and also even to the level of looking at strep mutans. And by looking at over 364 papers, reading about 222 papers, and ultimately excluding most of them because of the quality of the data, focusing on 14 papers, which is what always happens in a systematic review, we found the data showed that using sugar-free gum actually does reduce the incidence of tooth decay. It reduces the levels of plaque. It reduces the levels of strep mutans in the mouth. Absolutely, the data is not perfect, it's heterogeneous, and it is open to interpretation. There is no debate about that. But the trend is clearly there. Health economics data has shown from about 6 years ago that if 12-year-olds in this country chewed sugar-free gum after each meal, there would be an approximate saving of about £8 million to the NHS. That's relatively small fry when you think of the overall budget, but it's a start. And that's just in the 12-year-old population. I personally was delighted to see that these studies were quoted and referenced in the Delivering Better Oral Health version 4 document that OHID produced end of last year. And it shows that, again, this is the advice that our profession should be giving to our patients. So overall, this little piece of work shows areas where we need to do more research, but it also shows that behaviour change and behavioural adherence in populations may be achievable if we think outside the box and use some of the tools, if you like, that are already there. And this fits perfectly into the theme of the Oral Health Foundation, that everybody deserves a healthy smile. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thanks so much, Abby, for that. I'd now like to hand over to Professor Ian Chappell. I'm sure he's no stranger to any of you from Birmingham University, who's also going to give us a few words on behalf of Gen Industry. Ian.
Thank you, Nigel. Thanks, Murray, and thanks to the Oral Health Foundation. I'm old enough to be Abby's dad. So that means that I'm allowed slides. I'm allowed slides to get my message across. So, yes, so I'm here, declaration of things, just I'm here, supported by Johnson & Johnson. But actually the messages that I'm going to give, I think, I know, are general messages that are incredibly important and that fit beautifully with what Nigel and Mari said at the beginning, particularly when it comes to health inequalities. So I'm here to talk about the economic and societal costs of all diseases, but specifically periodontal disease, because gums are important, we all know that. Where would we be without our gums? But in general terms, all diseases are important. Both caries and periodontitis, they are the most prevalent diseases of human beings. Out of, 364 different human conditions. They give rise to more years lost to disability than any other human condition. And that's the Global Burden of Disease study in the Lancet from 2017. And the cost, the financial cost, is immense. $550 billion in 2015, periodontitis accounting for 80 billion of that. And of course, it's common, it affects almost 50% of the population. In its most severe form, it's the 6th most prevalent human disease. Causes tooth loss, and then compromises in speech, nutrition, self-esteem, quality of life, all the things that the Foundation are going to be focusing on, and also general health and well-being. And believe it or not, it is independently associated with all-cause and cardiovascular mortality in multiple studies from multiple different countries. So the links with periodontal disease and periodontal inflammation and systemic diseases are proven. You can ask the World Heart Federation, they've published on it. You can ask the International Diabetes Federation, they've published on it. They have conferences on P. gingivalis and gum health in medicine. So we really need to start actually doing our bit and making sure that we deliver for general overall health as well as oral health. So the sad thing is, or the positive thing, depending on which way you look at it, is that all diseases are preventable. So periodontitis is preventable. The earlier you diagnose it, the better the outcomes. And by treating it successfully, we improve general health outcomes as well. But there is a desperate need for public health campaigns to raise awareness. Because if you go out onto that street and ask the next member of the public you see what periodontitis is, they'll look at you as if to say, what? All the work in public health comes from our industry partners. It's really tough to get public health messages in oral care funded nationally by government. Sandra, you did a brilliant job for many, many years, but you know how difficult it is. We need to start investing in getting those messages out there. Let me give you some data from a white paper published in July last year by The Economist Intelligence Unit. This was commissioned by the European Federation of Gerontology and supported by P&G at the time. And the reason The Economist wanted to do this was because they looked at the prevalence of periodontitis in 6 major European countries over 20 years and said, oh my goodness, this has not changed. It's flatlined. And yet you've got all these advances in treatment, all these advances in approach, but it really isn't changing. So they decided to look at an economic analysis of the costs to the world economy, or to the European economy. And this is the model. I was involved in helping them develop this model. They started off with health on the left-hand side, which can become gingivitis, which is reversible, and you can restore health. And if you manage things at this end of the spectrum, then that's called prevention. But once the disease develops, undiagnosed and then diagnosed, you have to treat it, and your second intervention point is a little bit late. Here we're actually treating the disease once it's developed. Here we're preventing it from developing. And you go through the various steps of treatment according to the most recent S3 level treatment guidelines to reach your endpoint. They model cost, direct costs, indirect costs, time away from work, and what they call intangible costs, the impact on well-being, quality of life, etc. And they have financial figures they assign to these things, so there is a way of doing it. And they looked at 5 scenarios. The first scenario was, let's carry on doing what we do at the moment, business as usual. The second scenario was an extreme one. What happens if we drop the management of gingivitis to only 10% of cases? Then, scenario 3, what if we could eliminate gingivitis? Sounds a bit extreme, but what would the impact of that be? Then, number 4, what if we don't treat periodontitis at all? What is the impact of that on human well-being and on the economy? And then finally, number 5, what if we can diagnose and treat 90% of periodontitis? I'm going to focus on number 3 and on number 5. They looked at total healthy life years gained, cost in euros, cost per healthy life year, etc. The primary outcome was this one, return on investment. How much goes back into the economy for every euro or every pound that is spent in that particular model of care delivery? And they looked at stage 2 periodontitis, that's moderate disease. So this is an underestimate, okay? Moderate disease only. And nor does it deal with the systemic consequences of periodontal health or disease either, so it's a real underestimate. And that's the data for business as usual. You can see huge disparities across Europe. Italy, 97 billion. This is across a 10-year period, I must point out, but 97 billion. In the UK, where we have a lot of public funding, still 55 billion. A lot of that is out of pocket from patients. So what happens if we could eliminate gingivitis? Well, the cost of doing that by empowering patients to look after themselves at home more than halves the amount of money spent delivering that care. So we dropped to below 50% of the cost. It's a cheap way of doing it. Abby mentioned it, it's about education, it's about training, it's about empowering patients to look after themselves. And that deals with the health inequalities. Because, if you can afford a toothbrush, you can do it. The cost, however, of diagnosing and treating 90% of periodontitis, that's scenario 5, was enormous. The costs of care trebled and in some cases almost quadrupled, because that's a big workforce demand to get 90% of the disease diagnosed and managed. However, this is the return on investment. So you've got 2 columns for each country. The blue column is scenario 3, if we treat the gingivitis. You can see massive returns on investment. And the orange column is if we diagnose and manage 90% of periodontitis. That's the expensive form of treatment. Still gives you a positive return on investment over a 10-year period. And so they concluded that eliminating gingivitis or increasing the rate of diagnosis and treatment of periodontitis, both of those scenarios, one cheap, one expensive, they both give a positive return on investment in every single European country studied. So why aren't we doing all of it? And then making efforts to eliminate gingivitis will give you huge cost savings over that 10-year period. The biggest was in Italy, as you can see there, nearly 40 billion, and even in the Netherlands, which was the lowest, if you like, financial saving, just under 8 billion euros. And if you neglect gingivitis, then the costs of care go up significantly because more disease develops, and healthy life years reduce, more time off work, etc. But the biggest conclusion here was this is a canary in the mine for health inequalities. People cannot afford parental care, and that's a real challenge. And it was mentioned earlier on by Avi, I think, actually. You know, if your treatment is free because you're on benefits, that's fine. But if you're on the borderline and you can afford care and you don't get your dental treatment free, you cannot afford to go to a dentist in many European countries, particularly in Italy. I don't think I can afford it in Italy, to be honest. So what about the clinical standpoint? That's the economic standpoint. Well, I show this graph all the time. It's something that I drew about 25 years ago. And what it shows you on the y-axis here is disease, the amount of disease, and this is treatment. Left-hand side to right-hand side. And for those of you that are familiar with the new steps of parental care, this is evidence-based. Step 1 of treatment has 2 parts to it. The first part is training and educating and coaching our patients in self-care. That's the reduction you get in disease. The second part of step 1 is what we call PMPR, professional mechanical plaque removal. You get a further improvement. Step 2, that's when you go subgingivally and do your root surface instrumentation. You get a further improvement. And step 3 is when you review your patient, you re-instrument sites, further improvement. And step 4 is when you finally achieve your endpoint and get the patient into a maintenance or supportive care program. That's your biggest benefit. That's the cost going up as we move to the right. We need to shift the paradigm from the right to the left. We need to start really focusing on gingivitis. How do you make gingivitis sexy? Because that's what we need to do. Gingivitis has to become the sexiest topic. And you know, a lot of people will say, but that's data coming from industry-funded work. We would be stuffed without industry. They do a phenomenal amount of oral health promotion. And you know, for many years we've said, well, the mainstay is mechanical plaque removal. Mechanical plaque removal, that's what it's about. And it is, 100%. But we've shunned the chemical agents for years. That is not what the evidence says in the guidelines. If you look at the evidence in the guidelines, you get significant benefit. This is a hell of a slide, isn't it? I don't even got a clue what it says. Let me briefly explain it to you. Negative means we're getting a reduction in gingival inflammation. These are all significant. Doesn't matter what the chemical agent is. And this systematic review ranked them. You'll see at the very top there essential oils, you've got CPC, you've got chlorhexidine, and you also see in the dentifrices, which is so these are the mouth rinses in pale blue. In dark blue, you've got the dentifrices, you've got, your standard fluoride, sodium hexamonophosphate, etc. They all work. So how do we get the right balance across in our messaging? Because we want patients to clean mechanically, but we mustn't ignore the chemical agents because they work. Well, J&J pulled a national advisory board together in October. I had the honour of chairing this. There are some, really impressive characters here. And we had a great day, actually, debating some very, very difficult topics and looking at all the systematic reviews of the evidence. And we came out with some very simple messages. And here they are. For parental health, healthy gums don't bleed. Okay? Let's just make that clear. We need to make the public clear on that. Effective toothbrushing and incidental cleaning is essential for keeping gums healthy, and mouthwashes containing fluoride more than 100 parts per million are clinically proven. That are clinically proven to reduce plaque. They do offer additional benefit. They do offer additional benefit. And for children who can control their swallowing reflex of 7 years or older, spit don't rinse with water, actually. We trot out spit don't rinse. The evidence is not spit don't rinse. The evidence is spit don't rinse with water. Okay? That's really important. And if gingival bleeding is present, then use a fluoride mouth rinse. Why not? If you're over the age of 7, you can control it. You get as much fluoride in the surface of the tooth from that as you do by retaining toothpaste in the mouth and not rinsing with water. We then got a Hygienist Advantage board together, and their slant was similar but different. This was really interesting because their advice was remarkably the same, but put across in a far more patient-friendly manner, because they were thinking as if the patient's in the chair, how do I get this message across? Healthy gums don't bleed when brushed. Twice daily brushing along the gum line and cleaning between the teeth is essential to support a healthy mouth, and fluoride mouthwashes, clinically proven to reduce germs, offer additional benefit. And again, for children over 7 years of age, For better gum health, after brushing, spit, but do rinse with a fluoride-containing mouth rinse that is clinically proven to reduce plaque. So we need to change the paradigm. We need to change the paradigm from intervention to prevention. We need to actually start putting our money where our mouths are, and let's stop just talking the talk and let's start walking the walk, provided you put your trousers on because you're not on Zoom, as Nadia has. And with that, thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Ian. And what both Abby and Ian have said there goes so strongly into a programme that we're currently trying to work on. Essentially, I suppose, National Smart Month over very many years now has been a non-branded promotion of oral health messages to the public. What we're looking to do over the next 12 months is actually take this to a much, much wider audience to try and instill in the public a mind shift from using the dental practice as the repair shop down the road to actually taking control of their own oral health, realising that the 362 days a year when they're not in a dental practice, they're responsible. But it's going to be push-pull, because I think dental practices, practitioners, dental teams also need to realise that they have a responsibility for supporting that patient oral health journey during the period where they're not in the practice. So we're very excited by this campaign. We're working with a number of the sponsors in the room and others to try and get this off the ground later in the year. So watch for that. And the thing that particularly resonated with me, which I've been saying for very many years, is Abby's comment about the National Health Service. The biggest mistake made when the health service was thrown up in the air and reorganised was to not call it what it is. You want to be part of the National Health Service, health is good. You don't want to be part of the National Illness Service, and actually making that mind shift would be good for the health of the nation as a whole. So no more from me, because wine and canapes, etc. await. So we seem to have ordered some sun, quite remarkably. So do enjoy the terrace and the other rooms. And again, thank you all for coming, and great to see so many of you.